Alright, so here we are on Lesson 5, Day 1 of Solving Problems by Finding Equivalent Ratios. You should be on page 11 in your yellow notes packet. Alright, so again we're using tape diagrams to find equivalent ratios when given part-to-part ratios and the total of those two quantities. So we're going to start with example 1 here. It says a superintendent of highways is interested in the number of different types of vehicles that travel within his county. In the month of August, a total of 192 registrations were purchased, go ahead and underline that, for passenger cars and pickup trucks at the local Department of Motor Vehicles. They reported that in the month of August, for every 5 passenger cars registered, there were 7 pickup trucks registered. How many of each type of vehicle were registered in the county in the month of August? Alright, so we've underlined a lot of information here, so let's move on to the first question. It says the ratio of cars to trucks is 5 to 7. This is considered a part-to-part ratio. Write another part-to-part ratio for this context. So the first one was cars to trucks, so another one we could do would be to flip it, and it would be trucks to cars, and that ratio in numbers, whoops, alright, sorry about that. So we're looking at trucks to cars here, and that ratio in numbers would be 7 to 5, so just the opposite of the one that they talked about. Part B says the ratio of cars to total vehicles is 5 to 12. This is considered a part-to-whole ratio. Write another part-to-whole ratio for this context. So the first one compared cars, so another one we could do would be trucks to total vehicles. And that ratio would be 7 to the same total, 12. Alright. Part C here says, make a tape diagram that represents the part-to-part ratios in the problem. Okay, so first we are comparing cars and trucks. Right, this is like we did in the last one. So if we look back up, the ratio of cars to trucks was 5 to 7, so cars is going to have 5 boxes. And trucks will have 7, so make sure they're connected again. And trucks will just have 2 more off the bottom. Okay, so now we have to figure out what each box represents. Alright, so we know that there are 12 boxes here total, right? And if you look back up above in the notes, we underline the total number of registrations, I'll highlight it here, was 192. So if we go back down, we know that all of these boxes here, if we circle them all, equals 192. And we know that we have 12 boxes, so when we divide by 12, if you put it in your calculator or go off to the side, you will get 16. So each box here represents 16. So fill all that in. Okay, so then if we go down to part D, it says how many equal sized parts does your tape diagram consist of? We already talked about that. There are 12 equal sized parts because there's 12 boxes. So we're going to fill that in here. Part E says what total quantity does the tape diagram represent? We also talked about that. That's 192 registrations. Make sure to put a label on that. And then F here says what value does each individual unit of the tape diagram represent? And we found that out by doing 192 divided by 12, and that got us 16. Okay, so the last part, part G, says how many of each type of vehicle were registered in August. Alright, so if we go back up to the top where we underline, it says in August that there were 5 passenger cars registered. So down here we'd have 5 times each box is 16. 5 times 16 is 80. And then there were 7 pickup trucks registered, 16 in each box, and 7 times 16 is 112. Okay? Alright, so now you are going to skip example 2 for now. We're going to come back to it in the next video. Now I want you to move on to page 13, and we're going to look at number 2 where it says your turn. So we're down here number 2 about Sammy and David. Here it says Sammy and David were selling water bottles to raise money for new football uniforms. Sammy sold 5 water bottles for every 3 water bottles David sold. Together they sold 160 water bottles. Draw a tape diagram to show how many bottles of water each boy sold. So we've underlined the important numbers and labels here, so we're going to draw our tape diagram. So we're comparing Sammy and David. So we know the ratio of Sammy sold 5 water bottles, so Sammy gets 5 boxes. And David sold 3, so David gets 3 boxes. Remember to make sure they're connected. Okay, so now that we've drawn our tape diagram, we have to figure out how many go in each box. So we know, based on what we underlined, that together they sold 160 water bottles. So all of this together is 160. And we know that there are 8 boxes in total, so we divide 160 divided by 8, which if you do it off to the side on your calculator gives us 20. So each box you can fill in equals 20. Go ahead and do that. So now the question asks us to show how many bottles of water each boy sold. So Sammy sold, if we look up here, I'll do it in different colors. Sammy had 20 times 5 boxes, and 20 times 5 is 100. So Sammy sold 100 bottles. And if we look at David, David had 20 in each box times 3 boxes, and 20 times 3 gives us 60. So David sold 60 bottles. Alright, so we have one more example I want to get to, so I want you to flip over to the next page, so page 14, and we're going to look at number 3, the first one. It says Miss Johnson and Miss Sipes were folding report cards to send home to parents. The ratio of the number of report cards Miss Johnson folded to the number of report cards Miss Sipes folded is 2 to 3. At the end of the day, Miss Johnson and Miss Sipes folded a total of 300 report cards. Draw a tape diagram to show how many report cards each person folded. Alright, so we are comparing Miss Johnson and Miss Sipes. So those are the 2 people that go on the side. And if we look at the ratio of Miss Johnson and Miss Sipes was 2 to 3. So Miss Johnson is going to get 2 boxes. And Miss Sipes is going to get 3. So now we have to figure out how much each box represents. We know that in total, if we circle all of them, the total was 300. And we know that there are 5 boxes, so we're going to divide by 5. And 300 divided by 5 is 60. So each box represents 60. So fill those in. So now we have to figure out how many Miss Johnson sold. So there's 60 in each box, times 2 for the 2 boxes, and 60 times 2 is 120. So Miss Johnson folded 120 report cards. And if we look at Miss Sipes, again we have 60 times 3 boxes here, and 60 times 3 gives us 180. So Miss Sipes folded 180 report cards. Alright, so that's all we're going to do for Lesson 5, Day 1. So you can go ahead and stop right there and we'll go over these a bit more in class.